Hello and welcome to our first Bellringer session for value. Today we're starting a new section, so let's talk about what value means. The definition says the lightness or darkness of a hue. So that's basically talking about how an image is shaded in, essentially, or how they've filled it in. Now, these are some great examples of artwork that use value to their advantage. This is an image by Vermeer, a painting called The Girl with the Pearl Earring. This is actually painted in color, but when we turn it to grayscale, you can see how the value, where we've got this beautiful light contrasting up against the really dark darks, makes that area kind of stand out. And they do that just by using the value to help people notice these lighter parts right away. Now, this is another artist, Elizabeth Larsen Kohler, and this is titled Portrait of Jonathan. And I really love this piece. It's done in charcoal, and you can kind of see that this artist took a stick of charcoal and turned it on its side and just kind of scraped to get these lines, and building those lines together and layering them so it's darker in certain areas really starts to develop the idea of a portrait. And it's not super complete, which is really intriguing because you don't see every detail. You just see the slow buildup, and the expression that the artist was able to complete here is really interesting. Now, our first practice, we are going to just practice trying to match the values to the best of your ability. So I would like for you to follow along with me, and we'll just use a mechanical pencil for this one. And I want you to stay right with me so that you're not going ahead. Now, I know a lot of you know how to shade already, but I would like to talk you through it. And since we're not using drawing pencils, we're just working with mechanical pencils at our tables, I want to make sure you know exactly what to do. So grab your mechanical pencil. We are going to get started on our value scale. So let's break this value scale in half. So I'm going to make a little mark. Then I'm going to make another mark between those sections. So I'm splitting it into 4. Now, I'm just going to go through, and you can do this along with me. We are going to give ourselves a border at the top of this value scale, and we are going to fill it in so that it's so dark it's shiny. But you have to be careful that you are not going too hard with your mechanical pencil so that you break the lead. So we're filling it in with enough pressure to make it so it's solid and shiny, but not so much pressure that it snaps that piece of lead at the end. Now, we are working in rows of circles, so the texture I'm creating looks like this rather than lines like this, and especially better than lines going up and down. When we're filling in this value scale, we want to go across the value scale so that as we work each row, we can slowly press lighter and lighter. So I'm going to say, okay, this row is a little lighter, and I'll get all the way across. Okay, now this row is a little bit lighter. So we're just working on making it get lighter and lighter. Now take a look up at the board. Here is my problem. I have started to fade too quickly so that the end is going to be all white. So I need to go back up to the top, and I'm going to stretch out this darkness level so that, first of all, that dark is filling that first section out of our 4. And then I'm going to make a nice medium tone that's filling this section that's next. So we have dark and then a nice medium. And then we're going to go into our next section, our second to last here, and we are just using small circles to press lighter and lighter and lighter, and we want to fade out to white by the time we arrive at that last little mark here. So we're trying to slowly fade that out. Now, we are not coming back through with a blending stump, so I want you to just, with your lightest pressure, find a nice flat part of your pencil lead and use that to help make the soft fill-ins in those little circles that might be left open still. Now I'm going to go back through, and I'm going to just fill in some of these areas that look a little patchy. So I want you to do this with me. Let's go back for another pass, and I'm looking to make sure that we have a nice smooth transition so it's not like getting darker and then lighter and then darker. We want to have it go from dark all the way out to the medium and then smoothly out to white. So let's take a moment and we'll just perfect this. All right, now let's come over to the circle. We're going to draw a line straight down from that outermost edge as far out as you can touch, then straight from the bottom edge, that's the farthest out that you can touch. Now let's go ahead and fill this in with black, solid black. Careful not to break your pencil lead. Now, let's go just directly above that triangle, and we're going to make a little mark here and a little mark here. Now, we are going to have a little eyeball shape, so I'm going to just kind of curve this around, and then I'm going to come in from this side, and we're going to start out dark, and then I'm going to fade and get lighter, and I'm using small circles as we reach across to the other side. Now notice I left a little section, a little sliver down here at the bottom. Let's fill that in with just a nice light layer of value so that it stands out and is still visible next to our dark triangle underneath and our dark triangle above. Now let's go along the top of this edge, and just like we were working our rows in our value scale, we are going to do one row and it's good, and then we're going to press a little bit lighter for the next row, go all the way across, and then a little bit lighter for this next row, go all the way across. And remember to use small circles, and we're trying to find the flat edge of our mechanical pencil to help us make this as smooth as possible. So I'm going back through and I'm just adjusting my pressure to press lighter and lighter, and we want the highlight that we're creating to be left in white to be almost the shape of an eyeball. So we're using small circles to fill this in, and I'm just gonna adjust my highlight so it's not quite so bright. We want to really match this picture, so I'm going to fill that in just a smidge more. We want to have a nice smooth transition out. So really focus on getting that to be nice and smooth, little circles. Now we are going to come in and finish the shadow that goes underneath the sphere. Let's draw the lines, and we'll draw them fairly lightly so that we can fade out with value. We're going to start from the edge of that triangle that was solid black, and then we are going to add in this value that's getting lighter as we work our way across. Now it doesn't really fade too much until the very end, so I'm going back in and just filling that dark value until it starts to just barely fade out near the side edge of the paper. Now I'm going to give myself a border for the little white highlight at the edge of the table, and then I'm going to use small circles, and I'm filling in a nice medium for the table. I'm just going through and filling in these small circles. We want a nice light medium because we want the background to be the darkest that we can color. So I'm going to just kind of show myself that value so I can make sure that they're different. Now let's finish filling in our tabletop. And again, I'm finding that flat part of my mechanical pencil to just go through and help me fill that texture in so it's nice and smooth. And we're using small circles to fill this, and our goal here is to make it all one value on the tabletop rather than having it look kind of patchy. So we're really trying to make this nice and consistent all the way through, and so we're using the same texture to fill. We're always using those small circles, and we're filling in all the way up to that highlight line. All right, and then our last step is to go through and give ourselves a border around the edge of our sphere. And we are going to continue filling that in so that we are going the darkest value that we can. So we're using those small circles. I like to turn my paper so that I can get that border to be all the way up against the sphere. And we are using our heaviest pressure without breaking our mechanical pencil here. Now we're just working on filling this all the way through. This is a really great practice for students to complete because every time you try this out, you are slowly building the ability of control in your hand muscles. And so you might kind of feel it right now, and you can shake your hand out to kind of loosen up those muscles. But for a lot of you, this is probably something you might kind of feel like your hand might get tired as you're working through this for the first time. And that's perfectly normal because you are just practicing using muscles in your hand that you might not use very often. So we are going to just continue filling in those patches using those small, tiny circles. All right. Now we are going to begin today working on our second practice for value. The instructions say, shade the image with a drawing pencil and a blending stump to match the picture the best you can. We, again, are just working with our mechanical pencils. So this is another follow along. I would like for you to grab just a regular mechanical pencil from your block, and we are going to follow through step by step together. Now this is not an exact copy. You can see a little bit of the difference right here, but we're gonna start on this side of the little cherry side. We're gonna start with our darkest value. We're gonna just fade that out to a nice medium. Now let's hop over to this side of our cherry. We're gonna fill in that darkest value. And we've got a highlight that goes right up by the stem. So we're gonna fill in this darkest value, and then we're going to get lighter as we work our way out, but we wanna make sure that we don't fill in the line that goes right up against that highlight or this little circle of highlights that's kind of outlined for us. So let's give ourselves a border there. And we're gonna border in that light highlight along the edge and that little circle. And I gave myself some more space than what's outlined just to help me fade out better. Now we're going to come down to the bottom of our cherry, and we can see that it's a bit darker through the base here. So I'm going to fill this in all the way up to that bottom edge. And then I'm going to get lighter and work my way all the way out to that lighter value. Now we are not using blending stumps for this, just what's at our table. So we are going to do our best with our mechanical pencil to make this as smooth as possible. So let's go back up against that light edge, and we're just going to fade it out to white. We are going to come in and darken up through this center space. And we want to have a nice smooth transition from all of these areas. So it's kind of darker like through the center here. I'm gonna come into the highlight space and just kind of fade that out. Now we are just smoothing out that texture. All right, now let's hop over to this second cherry, the one that's on the left. We're gonna start with our darker spots and outlining where we are not going to fill. So let's start behind the stem here. So we're gonna fill in that dark edge, and then we kind of fade out as we get to the top. Now let's outline where we don't want to fill very lightly. We're going to come along and outline that little white line that goes all the way across. We're going to outline this little spot and then kind of the line that leads back to the stem. Now that we've got that space outlined, let's come against the edge of the right side here and fill in that darkest value. And this is super dark all the way across until we get to our highlight. So let's bring that highlight all the way up against the dark. So we're bringing that dark all the way across. Now it has a little bit of a water drop right here. So I'm gonna darken that space, and then I'm gonna leave that little highlight on the edge of the water drop. Now over here, there's a couple darker water drops. So I'm gonna darken that spot and this spot so I can see that I've already added those little highlights. And then I'm going to fade out with my medium tone. So we've got a little bit of highlight coming along the side edge, so I'm not going too dark here. And I'm gonna bring my medium all the way out to this highlight. And we're gonna fade out to white. And it's kind of got like a bright circle and then that little line behind it. And we're gonna fade out to a nice medium before it reaches that highlight line. Now we need to come back through and darken. So I'm going to darken all the way through. And we're just filling in that bottom space. Now we're gonna add our shadows underneath. So let's just fill that little space. It's gonna be darkest directly underneath and then fade out. darkest directly underneath, and then fade out. And our last step, we are gonna shade in our stems. We've got a little bit of texture at the top of this one, so let's add some lines going across. And then we're just going to fill that with a medium tone. And then I'm gonna come in with a darker value, and I'm just gonna darken up the left side a smidge. And let's do that over here. We're gonna add a little bit of textural detail here, so some lines. We're leaving some white spots. It's a little bit darker like in the center of this stem, so let's make it dark and then medium at the top and the bottom. Now, as you see little parts that you would like to go through and perfect, you can absolutely do that. But that was our demo for the day. Good job. All right, for today's practice, we are working on our third experimentation with shading. Now, you have already done a practice like this with pen, but we are going to just pick up with our mechanical pencils today. Now, let's go through and do this as a follow along style. So we are going to start with hatching. Let's grab our pencils, and we're going to begin by filling this in with solid pencil texture, but we want to do it in the pattern that it's asking for. So we're filling this in solid, dark. And now we are going to just slowly space out our lines that we're adding. So I'm going to do a couple layers of lines here. And the way that we're going to get more of that like lightness to show through is we're going to add more white space between our lines. So the more white you leave between, the lighter your value will look. So we're gonna slowly start spacing out our lines so that we have more and more white space between them. And by this last one, we barely are adding any. Then go along the bottom and clean it up with your eraser. All right, now let's fill in our cross hatching, and we're gonna do this with like an X style. So we're gonna fill in our darkest value. We're gonna fill it totally and completely in by using the texture that we're trying to attempt. So let's fill this darkest box in by using that X method. Now we're going to connect our diagonal corners, and I'm gonna do one layer of lines, all very close together. And now let's overlap it with a second layer, connecting the other opposite corners. And then we'll fill it in until it looks like we've got just a smidge more white showing. And that's our process. We're going to slowly allow more space between the lines so that it looks like it's getting lighter and lighter. So we are going through and just making more space between those lines as we work our way across so that it's getting lighter and lighter. So by the time we're reaching here, we're gonna have much bigger spaces between and just a bigger, lighter grid. You can also use your pressure of your pencil to help get it lighter. Now looking at mine, I would say, and I want you to look up at the board, see how it goes dark, dark, and then it's really light. I need to go back through on this one to add a few more lines to help that transition be smoother. We don't want to have any big jumps where it goes from really dark to really light. So I am just going backwards through these to help kind of tie them together a little bit more by making sure we don't have like one really abrupt change spot. Now let's hop into Scribble. We are going to fill our first by just going through with the tiniest little circles, and we are filling with our heavy pressure. Just don't break your mechanical pencil. I hate broken pencils. They're pointless. Oh, I'm sorry. Now, we are going to slowly space out our scribbles so that we have those little white spots, which I like to refer to as the donut holes, these little open spaces. Now, we're just trying to slowly incorporate more and more of the donut holes to be left behind. So that means we just stop filling a little bit sooner. So now I'm gonna slowly start increasing the size of my scribbles, and I'm gonna allow more and more of the white to be left showing through as I'm working through my textures. So for this last one, we're barely adding any. Now let's look and see, do I have any abrupt change spots? It goes dark, 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 and then a big jump for me. So I'm gonna go back in, and I'm gonna add a couple more lines to each of these to kind of help that have a smoother transition out to light. Here we are on our last practice. We are going to fill in exactly the same way that we did for Scribble. It's a little cheat. So we're going to add just little scribbles filling this in, and we want to fill it so that it's completely solid. Now we are going to do the exact same thing as our scribble. We're filling with little donut holes showing left behind. And we want these to be much smaller than the scribbles we used for a scribble technique, because we want it to look like there's dots instead. Like we actually took the time to make all of those dots rather than having it look like lines. So now, again, tiny little scribbles, decrease the size, but leave more space showing through. And then we are going to come in and add dots on top of our scribble layer. So that way you can see the dots. Now we want to avoid the quick dot with the Nike swoosh. This will break your pencil lead and looks like lines, not dots. It's not doing anyone any good. So switch to dot working, and you want to set your hand down on the table and you're just lifting and lowering. And at this point we are switching to exclusively dots, no more scribble. And we are trying to fill all of those open white spaces with these dots so that we can have a nice even layer of value. So we're filling all of those white spots, and I'm going really fast because I don't have to lift my pencil up and down very high into the air, because that's when you get the Nike swooshes, and it takes you way longer to do it that way. So we're just lifting and lowering, barely lifting our pen at all. Then we're gonna slowly start spacing out these dots, and we'll have more of the white space showing through between them. So we want to keep them nice and dot size, don't let it change to a line, and we're slowly adding more white space to let it show through. Now we are going to just slowly decrease the amount of dots that we add in each of these little boxes, and for our last few, especially this last one, it's just a couple little dots. And now we take the time, look and see, do we have any spots that are abrupt changes? I would say yes, I do. So right here is where I need to come back in, because this is much darker than this and it's not a good transition. So I need to add some more dots to this one to help it transition a little bit smoother. All right, there we go. Now you can take a little bit longer if you need to finish this with some more time. Thank you so much for following along for our shading and value practice. I would like for you to make sure that you fold this in half with value facing up, and you need to put your name at the top left corner to make sure that no one takes this. When we get to the end of the unit, you're going to be creating a book, and if you're missing one of your inserts, you'll have to do it again. So make sure that you have those and you are not missing any. You can even start paper clipping them together now that you've got two that are finished. Great job, and thanks for following along.